Mr. Minister, thank you very much for covering indeed a very wide range of topics and opening up a number for discussion with the audience. We'll open it up to the group for questions, but I'd like to ask George Soros if he would like to lead off. George.
I very much regret I didn't actually hear your remarks because I was at the IMF, but I'm very, very happy to hear at the very end that Russia is going to play a constructive role in reconstructing the international financial system, that Russia is intending to maintain an open economy. And I also want to welcome some of the practical signs that I see that I find very encouraging. The fact that I think just a day or two ago, President Medvedev met with civil society and had a meeting that was supposed to last an hour and a half. Spent 4 hours discussing how the civil society and non-governmental organizations could function more freely in Russia. I think that the fact that a lawyer who was sentenced to jail, Ms. Vakmina, who was defending Khodorkovsky, has been released. In that context, I hope that the trial will be a fair one, because it's very important for the rule of law to be more properly observed in Russia. And I think we should respond to these signs from Russia in a very constructive way when it comes to restructuring debts and generally enabling Russia to cope with its own financial crisis. I think we are talking about sort of resetting the reset button, and I think that it's now perhaps taking a practical form, and I think that is greatly to be welcomed. And finally, I can't help but acknowledge our personal cooperation, because we are both supporters of the European Humanities University and Smolny Institute, and you've helped to raise funds for it. These are private institutions, so it's really a pleasure to be hearing you here. Thank you.
Но если я почувствовал, то не было вопроса.
Well, as far as I sensed, there was no question, but it was rather a comment. Let me only emphasize what you stated at the end about the support of private institutions, education institutions. I'm acting as a trusteeship board in some of those institutes, and I hope that this support will help some major institutes in Russia to stand strongly on their feet. And the more such institutes we have, the better, since the establishment of high-quality education in Russia is a priority both for the public and the government, and those priorities will come true only if we have more private institutions with a good financial basis. Thank you very much for your comment, but I'm prepared to take all your questions as well.
Okay, I'll go to Jim Wolfenson to put a real question to you. Jim.
I have the benefit that George did not have of having listened to you, Mr. Minister. And I do want to thank you for really an embracing talk on the Russian economy, and in particular in describing your role at the center of the financial community, of which all of us, I think, are very much aware. I'd like to direct you to one of your early observations, or early remarks about unemployment in your country, and take you to the issue of poverty, not surprisingly. over the years, you've done a terrific job in bringing people out of poverty in your country. And the most recent statistics would indicate that there is some reversal of this excellent record. I'd like to get your impressions on what it is that the government can do in relation to such things as pensions, as child benefits, as unemployment, at a time when you're trying to keep your budget deficit, as you said, down to 5%. What are you going to do in terms of priorities, matching the social balance with the financial balance?
Thank you, Jim, for this pertinent question. Indeed, we pay attention to the situation of the most vulnerable groups of population in the situation of crisis. Talking about retired people, families and households with many children and other groups of population. In the framework of anti-crisis measures, we took a number of measures to support these groups of population. One of the biggest major decisions was to optimize and modernize the procedure for earmarking and calculating the amount of pensions. This will increase 50% pensions as compared to the current status next year, which is a big figure. It took us several years to take this decision, and it so happened that it coincided with a crisis. During crisis, it is difficult and very hard to take such major decisions on additional expenditures in the amount of 1.5% of GDP. This will increase our taxes because of the social allocations. The allocations and expenditures will increase only next year, but in the interest of businesses to restrict the taxable basis in 2010, we will increase the taxation starting 2011. It is adequate to increase 1% starting 2011 the amount of taxes from the payroll amounts. This will be a major measure because the employers are unwilling to pay, of course, which is normal, but we will take this measure due to the current situation of pensioners. The reforms also provide for a number of measures on pension insurance, new principles of allocations, accumulation of rights of pensioners, including compulsory pay-as-you-go part of the pension, which will be constituted and accrued on the deposits of the pensioners. This is a new measure. We decided not to postpone this program, and starting 2010 the pensioners will get an upgrade and increase of pensions. But there will be some pensioners who will not get enough due to the small amounts of accumulated rights in the previous period, due to the absence of seniority record or due to low income categories or sectors they worked. For those pensioners we will ensure the minimum living standard, thus removing them from the category of the line below poverty. This is an ambitious program which will, however, implement since it has been prepared for several years now. Another measure is the support of the families with many children. In 2007 2007 we started the program to support families where, with a second or third child and more. We allocated the so-called capital for maternity. This capital can be accumulated, and this is the right provided to every family to buy a house, to spend it on education, or to use it as a part of pension capital, such as a contribution from maternity fund. This will use part of our reserves for long-term incentives to families with 2 or more children. We this year we decided that we will spend somewhat less $500 for the second child starting this year. They will get cash allocation, which is kind of a modernization of initial idea, as a measure to support families, especially now, due to the reduction of the living standard. We will look and see whether we will be able to extend it. I'm talking about the cash allocations, based on the analysis how this will affect the status of those families. Now we are working on targeted assistance to families. This was a major topic on our agenda. On top of our agenda, when we had a lot of resources, the measures were not specific, targeted or earmarked to specific groups. Now we are shifting from more expensive program to more targeted and more specific oriented allocations to those in need. Our objective is to overcome poverty in the next 12 or 18 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I mentioned at the outset that we were taking the occasion today to release a new book called The Russian Balance Sheet, co-authored by Andres Oslin, our senior fellow here at the Institute, and Andy Kudrin from CSIS. And I want to ask them to ask the next questions. Andres Oslin.
Thank you, and it's great to see you and hear you here. We met the first time in 1991 in Stockholm. You and Sergei Vasilyev, who's also here, came over, and you wanted to set up an economic think tank in St. Petersburg, the Leontiev Center. We did, and it is still there. It's the dominant independent economic think tank in St. Petersburg. Very much thanks to the two of you. I would like to turn the question to trade policy. We discussed that a lot in our book. And we have a couple of demands on the US side. Get rid of the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. It's totally obsolete. And another, that the Senate should ratify the civilian nuclear agreement, which we think was very good. That was concluded last year. It needs to be ratified. But the question to you is what you touched lightly upon. It's Russia's accession to the WTO. You have been a strong supporter as Deputy Prime Minister and Chairman of the working group of, on WTO in the Russian government of an early accession to the WTO. Can you explain a little bit to us more how you see the process going forward? When will it finally happen? And which do you see as the main problems on the road to this goal? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, in 2000, I headed the governmental committee in my capacity as the Minister of Finance, the Committee on Russia's Accession to the World Trade Organization. At the moment, I'm a deputy chair of this committee. It is headed by Mr. Shuvalov, first deputy chairman of the Russian government. So together with him, we make every effort to conclude our process of accession. At the same time, I should recall that the protocol on tariff regulation between Russia and the US was signed back in 2006. And with the EU, we signed a similar protocol in 2004. So it's quite a long period of time already that it seems that we have agreed on almost difficult issues. The most difficult issues are those that are bilateral, because they have lots of sensitivities, and you have to conclude bilateral arrangements with 120 countries. And we concluded that work. And I thought that we went through them, we passed the main section of this path towards the accession. The remaining portion is the Working Party report, which solves the systematic issues on Russia's accession to the World Trade Organization. And among those, there are 2-3 very sensitive that must be finalized. But somehow, I just put it this way, since 2006, when we reached some agreement bilaterally with the United States, the process was going very slowly, and it's been delayed again and again. What is the problem? Maybe it's because Russia is not so flexible as regards systematic matters. No, I think that our relations and Russia's accession to the World Trade Organization are now affected by some global policies. We have some background regarding the relations with the Ukraine or Georgia, starting from some other politically sensitive issues like human rights and so on. Probably, I can only guess actually, but probably these all became the reason why the negotiations stopped being active and slowed down. And I assure you that all the outstanding issues can be solved within a couple of months, but we still cannot solve them for 2-3 years. I know under which conditions Ukraine or China joined the World Trade Organization. There were lots of reservations, and they were less ready than Russia in many areas, but nevertheless there was political will, and those countries expediently joined the World Trade Organization. Unfortunately, together with the Bush administration, we failed to overcome these invisible obstacles, even though the readiness was declared by both parties. The progress is there, but it's very slow. We are finalizing the so-called Working Party report. It is already being through 4 versions, so it's 90% readiness. So what are the impediments for this work that requires only just a couple of months? Well, partially probably that happened due to the election period in the United States. And now we hope that together with the new administration, America will be able to solve all these problems. And I said that both in the Department of Commerce and in the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, as well as in the State Department. I hope that new relations in many areas will be demonstrated in these areas well. I could probably mention just 2 points that continue to remain sensitive. That is the difference with the U.S. About the role of the so-called state-owned enterprises in the economy. I must say that this is the difference that we have only with the United States, because it is only the United States that has the law on the role of state-owned enterprises that works in countries like the Soviet Union, and that law was passed when the Soviet Union still existed. Life changed since then, but this law that is enforced in the United States turned out to be an obstacle to formulate within this systemic document some language about the enterprises in Russia. I think that it is the law in the U.S. that is outdated, but it is an obstacle, so we turned out to be dependent from this position. I think it's not difficult to remove this contradiction, and there are no principal differences, especially in the city environment when the number of state-owned enterprises is growing in the United States itself. Similarly, as regards agriculture, 2 points there. The level of support to agriculture subsidies. This subject was discussed at length, but we're close to the resolution. Russia is ready to undertake some commitments for the transition period. Actually, we ask that for the transition period we'll maintain a high level of subsidizing, but after the transition period we get to the proportional figures similar to that exists in other countries. We also have a different as regards the sanitary, phytosanitary controls. But the phytosanitary differences mainly there between Russia and the United States. But for instance, I can give an example. The European Union has different norms for phytosanitary controls than the United States. And this is why they block or the imports of American meat to Europe. Europe is our closest neighbor, and if we adopt the standards of the European Union, that will mean that we'll create very rigid standards for American imports. But actually we are ready to compromise, even though the US and the EU are still arguing within the WTO on this matter. But unfortunately our situation is that we need to agree both with the US and the EU, even though they cannot agree on this matter between themselves. So I think here we will try to find a compromise anyway. All these matters can be resolved if there is a political will, and it will take only a couple of months. There is another difference that we have with the European Union regarding the export fees on timber. Russia adheres to the policy for greater processing of wood and timber domestically, and that is the reason why the export fees were increased. But we don't consider that an issue that cannot be resolved. We can discuss it. So I believe personally that we have every chance to join the WTO. But there is always an ever-present risk there. Russia for many years has been preparing the creation of a customs union with Kazakhstan and Belarus. But this decision was postponed due to the fact that Russia's and Kazakhstan's negotiation processes on the WTO accession were not completed. Our goal was to complete the WTO negotiations first, and then on the basis of these positions hold negotiations between the three countries I mentioned and remove the customs barriers between the three nations, create a customs union. When we felt that the WTO accession will be delayed by many years, we started preparing the documents and the materials and the legal documents, draft laws to create the customs union in parallel to our negotiations. And at the moment, these documents are pretty much ready, and the customs union can be created almost now. If we create a customs union before we join the WTO, then all of the results of the WTO negotiations of Russia and Kazakhstan have to be cancelled, and then we'll have to start new negotiations from the position of a new customs union. So there is this situation that we actually postponed the creation of the customs union by 1 year because we wish to join the WTO first. But nevertheless, we'll have to make a choice at some stage, and should we find no political will and arrangements, then other tasks will be pressing us, and we'll need to solve those tasks and goals, because if we are still stuck, we will not be able to change our tariffs, because even for the period of accession we are committed to certain tariffs. So these are the problems of risks and tariffs, but we still have some time until the end of this year to join the organization.
Thanks, Fred, and thank you very much, Alexei L, for being here today. Very glad to see you. You look well, not under undue stress, given the burdens of your job. Very pleased to see that. I have a question for you, but before I get to my question, I'm afraid I have to say a couple of words about the book at hand. It's not every day a book is released of which I'm a co-author, so I apologize for a minute. I need to express some thanks to some key people and institutions that have supported the project. First of all, to our supporters and sponsors. I want to lead off with the U.S.-Russia Business Council, who's been a partner and supporter from the beginning. And I want to particularly acknowledge Ed Verona, their current president, and his predecessor, Gene Lawson. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank our corporate supporters who have supported the project. That includes AIG, BP, Caterpillar, Chevron, Coca-Cola, ExxonMobil, Microsoft, PepsiCo. Anders and I have some pretty cool plans for year 2, and we hope that all of you, well, almost all of you, and maybe some others of you will join in supporting next year of the project. I'd also like to take a moment just to acknowledge my friend Charlie Ryan, who's been a great supporter of my work at the Carnegie Endowment and the Center for Strategic International Studies over the years. All of you know Charlie is a great Russia business pioneer in Russia, in U.S.-Russia business relations, and business in Russia in general. But I'm often described as a Russia expert. But when I want to know what's going on in Russia, that's the guy I go to. He is to get the best line of what's happening in Russia. Thanks, Charlie. I especially also want to acknowledge our 2 institutions, CSIS and the Peterson Institute. In particular, first of all, my co-author, Anders, dear friend and longtime collaborator. I think we raised a lot of eyebrows when we heard that we were writing a book together, but he's a fantastic friend and partner to work with. I also want to especially acknowledge my boss, John Hamry, who unfortunately can't be here today because he's entertaining the King of Jordan. Sorry, Mr. Minister, but kings outrank ministers. And Fred Bergston, of course. The 2 of us on CSIS and 2 of you at the Peterson Institute. And it reminds me of Dostoevsky's philosophical soliloquy, I think from Notes from the Underground, about whether 2 + 2 = 4 or 5. And he makes a strong case that 2 + 2 = 5. And I always understood that to mean that Russia is an unusual place in which the unconventional can happen and maybe things don't always add up as we might conventionally think. Now, I'm sure that at the finance ministry, the 2 + 2 = 4. But in the case of our partnership with the Peterson Institute, I think that 2 + 2 equals more than 5. But the proof is in the book, so read the book. You can tell us what it adds up to. Okay, I do have a question for you. You mentioned foreign policy. You mentioned the reset button. There is concern in Washington amongst many that the Russians perceive that it's the Americans who need to do all the resetting of their policy toward Russia, while the Russians don't need to do too much in order to get to a more constructive outcome. One of the crucial arguments of our book, though, is that the financial crisis gives everybody a different perspective on their foreign policy interests. And I was wondering if you could talk about, from your perspective, how you see Russia's foreign policy interests have changed, to what extent, in the wake of what's happened over the last 8 or 9 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you asked a very serious question. I need to, defend my foreign ministry and steal its bread. But I will probably say a few words in this regard. Even in your question, you said that there is a concern that Russia is expecting the U.S. to make the first step, and that Russia is not ready or is not expecting that it has to walk its own part of the road. But I think there is one quality in our relations that impeded us. From my viewpoint, the U.S. Viewed these relations as relations with a partner that is not equal to the U.S. Russia is not an equal partner of the U.S. That was what impeded our relations. And in this regard, everyone was expecting Russia to make the steps, and only then, as a reward for good behavior, others will be making, or the U.S. or the West in general will be taking steps. But Russia has changed very much. It's a market economy. It's a free movement of people. We are familiar with all types of democracy. Our citizens study abroad and then return to work in the country. We can compare, and in general I think that we have enough democratic foundations in the country to make sure that the country develops further. So from this viewpoint, Russia cannot accept that it's not an equal partner. Russia has lots of grounds to say that it is expecting fair treatment as an equal partner, and we don't want to be just the pupils who are, graded by teachers. And this is something that is hardly changing in our psychology, in our heads. And if we are ready for a movement towards each other, we need to understand that it's an equal movement. We need to have some guarantees that it will be the movement of the equals towards each other. I think that is what is raising concern and some mistrust. For instance, Jackson Vanik was just mentioned. Probably it is not really impeding our trade relations, but it is a very humiliating amendment. It is humiliating, really, and when we say that we want to have equal relations in trade, we are told that, we have a Congress that cannot revise this amendment. This is what our Congress is like. And I don't understand whether it's not logical, but many people present here believe that it is quite logical. But actually, the amendment was adopted when the situation in the world was totally different. We need to take account, if we need to take account of the specificities of the American democracy once again, then it's fine, and we then need to somehow move around this circumstance. But it's not always reciprocated. So I think that in our psychology we need to have the feeling of equal relations. I think that Russia has every right to expect that due to its economic and military capacity, because if this restart will happen, then we can create the new collective security framework worldwide, and Russia is ready for that. Russia is saying that we are ready to merge our capacities in order to create the new world security or European security order. But once again I say we need to overcome this misunderstanding or mistrust as regards the partnership of non-equals. Should that happen, then I think that we will be able to achieve the results that we cannot even dream of now. I think that it is quite possible. And Russia has always been at the world arena or European arena as present as the important participant 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 400 years ago. And I think that many do not take account of the fact that Russia will still be there. That's why we're expecting equality. And I would like to note one more question. You said that I look well as a person that is not under stress. I will give an example. They are discussing this in our press now, that after my speech that I had at the Collegium of the Ministry of Finance, where I reminded that there are three factors that helped Russia over the recent years. There's the oil price, Last year it was the highest ever, highest in history. The previous peak never reached the price that we had last year. The period of growth of oil price in the world lasted so many years that was never witnessed. We have never had 8-9 years of growing oil prices without drops. And the third factor, Russia had the growth of output of oil, or production of oil, starting from year 2000 that reached up to 10% per annum. So on the oil price, on the duration of a growth of oil price, and on the increase of production, we had the most favorable external conditions for our economy. And I said that probably these cannot be repeated in 20 years or 50 years. But many newspapers and journalists quoted me in the correct way, saying that these are external economic conditions, special economic conditions that cannot be repeated in the coming 50 years. But a number of non-economic publications just ignored these two words, external environment. So they said that Kudrin expects that economic environment is not going to be as successful as it was a few years ago. And one communist newspaper had a headline, 50 years of a crisis.
Final question from Erki
And some people on a factory asked Putin, why is Kudrin believing that the crisis will last 50 years? And Putin replied, you know, Kudrin is under stress. Everybody's passing him. So I'm happy to hear from you that I look not stressed.
Final question from Erki Liikanen, Governor of the Bank of Finland and former Commissioner of the European Commission.
Mr. Minister, you have been praised for prudent fiscal policies and with justification. You have had stabilization fund and so forth. But when finance ministers talk today about medium-term fiscal balance, they don't look all very well. How do you see the medium-term balance? Now you have strong stimulus, tax cuts, more spending, and your stabilization fund is, of course, running a lot of funds out next year. How do you see 5 years on?
Если говорить о балансе, прежде всего, бюджета, то
About the budget balance, of course, we face a serious challenge of optimizing our expenditures. Perhaps a reduction, reducing our spending. Second problem is the reduction of social taxes. I said that starting 2011 we will increase insurance payments, which will help improve the balance. But perhaps this decision is not enough, and within the matter of 2 or 3 months we'll have to take additional decisions to ensure more stable balance for the midterm. We will announce our measures in the next months on stabilizing the midterm balance. This is our current work. Thank you.
Mr. Minister, thank you again very, very much for joining us today. We appreciate your sharing your thoughts on so many topics. We wish you the best of success, both in maintaining your good health and in restoring your growth from the crisis. We look forward to working with you on WTO entry and the whole range of other issues where our countries cooperate. We thank you once again for joining us today.